What's up, everybody? It's Zack McCarley with StrengthCrew.com, and welcome to another edition of Strength Talks. Tonight, I'm going to be going into sport-specific training. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what I do for my training and how I train sport-specifically. So the first thing I want to get into is movements. So for strongman, you need to be good in movements like an overhead press, grip strength, loading, static power, and being able to move quickly with your feet under load. Other sports, obviously, you're going to be focusing on other things. So for an Olympic weightlifter, you need to focus on things like snatch and clean and jerk and things that augment those two lifts. For a power lifter, you're looking at, squats, bench press, and deadlift and things that augment those lifts. The next thing I consider is environment. So what do I mean by environment? I mean everything external to you. So we're looking at things like what you're going to be competing on. In most sports, it's pretty easy. For powerlifting and Olympic lifting is usually either rubber or wooden floor. Pretty straightforward, crowds in front of you, no mirrors in front of you, so you don't want to train with a mirror in front of you, right? For strongman, it's pretty different. So you can do events on grass, you can do events on pavement, you can do events on finished concrete, you can do events on rubber, and a bunch of other surfaces. What you need to know is what you're going to be competing on, so you can train on that, and so you can make your battle plan according to that. So that's to say, one example of that would be, say you're doing a yoke sandbag carry medley, okay, and you're going to run through. And do you want to run around the yoke and then grab the sandbag, or do you want to let the yoke slide away from you and then turn and grab the sandbag? Well, it depends on the pavement or whatever you're on. If you're on asphalt, you're going to drop it and run through because the yoke's going to get caught by the asphalt and it's not going to follow you. If you're on finished concrete, you're going to let the yoke slide over your head and then turn and grab the bag because it's going to be quicker. And on finished concrete, a metal yoke is going to just slide when it hits the ground. So that's an example of environment. Conditions, and what I mean by conditions is everything internal to you. So those conditions would be, did you get enough sleep? Did you eat right? Are you, how did your training cycle go? Are you injured right now? Things like that. I personally change up a lot of things in my training, even on a weekly basis. Once a week I usually train before I eat, which isn't the best for gains, but I think it's good mentally, and it's good to be in a place where if you do happen to be competing and you're hungry, you're mentally strong enough to know that you can do what you need to do, and you're mentally strong enough for it not to even faze you. If that were to happen to an athlete that were like, oh, I have to eat, and then I have to do this, and it throws you out of your rhythm, you may just collapse under a little bit of pressure. For somebody that changes those conditions, those internal conditions, and occasionally doesn't get enough sleep and has to train anyway, or doesn't eat quite right that day and has to train anyway, you develop a type of grit that somebody with such a structured program doesn't develop. Time zones is another thing that can play in. So you need to be aware of exactly when you're going to be competing in reference to your internal clock. So that is to say, I live on the West Coast, and if I'm going to be competing, say, on the East Coast, that's a 3-hour time difference. So if they say we're going to start at 9 a.m. over there, I'm going to be starting at 6 a.m. my time. That means I should be waking up, pretty early to train if you can. If you can't, then, that time zones kind of falls into conditions and environment. It's one of those, that can be associated with either. But be aware of time zones. Be aware of just conditions and constraints that are going to be put on you during your contest. Another thing I like to consider is clothing. So, like this clothing has this icon right here, beautiful American Strongman Corporation, Dion and Mike. Alright. Anyway, if you're doing something like a log or an axle or a Husafelt, what I mean by axle is axle clean and press. But this material will grab onto things a lot better than just a smooth cloth. And so you need to be taking that into consideration, at least for strongman. What does your contest shirt look like? Is it going to have like an icon on it so you can train with shirts with icons on them? Or is it going to be something with no icons, so you should be training with a smooth shirt? And if you don't have one, flip it inside out. Much harder to do those events without an icon on it. It definitely decreases the friction. Something else, this will be the last thing I talk about sport-specific training, is body composition. So depending on your sport, you need to, form your body to that sport. So that's to say, here's a really obvious one. Bodybuilding. You're not going to do well if you're carrying a ½ inch of fat everywhere on your body. You won't have, the conditioning look. You won't have any vascularity. You won't have any striations. You won't have any, cuts. You won't look really good on stage. So, for that you need to lean out. For something like strongman, I'll go back to an axle clean. It's going to help you to be, to have a little bit of a big belly. We call it a shelf. When you clean an axle onto that shelf, then you can lean back. You can switch that hand and you can bump it back up for a continental clean. For a guy that's got washboard abs, he's going to come up here and it's going to want to slide straight down on him. That's going to be no good. So that's a small glimpse. Another example, actually, I was talking to one of my friends that does triathlons last night, and he was, me and him were kind of talking. He said it's really funny that you're going to be going to the Arnold and competing there, and you're going to be like one of the smallest guys there, because when I compete, and this is coming from my friend, when I compete, I'm the biggest guy in my competitions, and he's about, 6 foot, maybe 6'1", he's about 180, 190 pounds. He says, I'm usually the biggest guy, so, it's just, and you're huge compared to me, so it was just kind of funny talking about the reference of sizes in different sports. And he mentioned to me that I asked him, well, you're kind of taller, so that should give you an advantage in the run and the swim, right? You got the longer levers for the swimming, and you got the longer strides for the running. That's good. And he said, yeah, those are nice, but the bike is where a lot of guys will make up time on me, because I have a fair amount wider frame than the smaller, 125 pound guys. And when you're bicycling at 20, 25 miles an hour, there's a lot more wind resistance than when you're just running. So when, those smaller, thinner, sleeker guys, they can just bike and they just haul ass, he said. He's like, those guys just zoom straight past me because they have so much less wind resistance, and I can huff and puff and pedal, and it's like I got a parachute behind me. So there's another example of sport-specific training. Tuning your body into your sport and creating the best kind of you that you can. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment boxes below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Zack McCarley, Pro Strongman Zack, and Strength True TV. Don't forget to visit us at strengthtrue.com/forums. And I look forward to putting out the next video in a week.